Public Accountability meeting for North Yorkshire Police. I am Commissioner Zoe Metcalfe and I will be chairing today. So turning to the agenda item 1, are there any apologies, which I believe there are from Mabs and Mike? And just to say, the minutes of the previous meeting are recorded and published onto the OPFCC website. So agenda item 2, I've asked the Chief Constable Lisa Winwood to come and outline North Yorkshire Police's forward vision for the constabulary. So Lisa, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And Simon, if you could pop the slides up, that would be great. Thank you. By all means, if anybody's got any questions as we go along, I will keep an eye out for your hands. So good afternoon to everybody that's watching today. And as the Commissioner has just mentioned, she's kindly asked me to share my vision for policing. So by way of introduction, I think, I swore an oath as a police officer, as all officers do. And the key aspect of that captures what policing is all about. And that's to serve with fairness, integrity, diligence, impartiality. It talks about upholding human rights, respecting all people, and preventing harm and offences. In essence, it's about keeping people safe and making them feel safe, which is our mission here in North Yorkshire, as you can see on the slide. But we don't operate in a vacuum. We are impacted upon by national and regional issues. So if you can move to the next slide, Simon. Thank you. So I thought it would be helpful to share the national vision for policing first, given that we don't operate in a vacuum, and the national direction includes the things that you can see on this slide. I won't talk through them specifically. They're fairly self-explanatory, and that is, of course, supported by the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners, the College, and the National Police Chiefs Council. You might have also seen on Monday that the Home Secretary released the 2023 Strategic Policing Requirement. So the SPR sets out the Home Secretary's view of what the current national threats are and the national policing capabilities in order to counter those threats. And we have to act on that direction locally. And these threats are violence against women and girls, terrorism, serious and organised crime, national cyber, child sexual abuse, public disorder, and civil emergencies. So we also have to respond locally to some of those requirements, and that's why we need to work closely with partners such as the National Crime Agency, regional organised crime units, immigration enforcement, border force, and Home Office. But this is quite a complex landscape I've just described. So I now want to move this into the local. So the local vision needs to be captured in a way that can relate to and be translated for local policing here in North Yorkshire. So next slide, please, Simon. So the vision is simple here in North Yorkshire. If you remember, our mission at the start is to keep people safe and make them feel safe. How we achieve that is through our vision, which is to deliver an exemplary police service. But what does that actually mean? So moving on to the next slide, please, Simon. That leads us on to the dictionary definition, first of all, is to deliver a very good service. A service that's so good, others would want to copy it. But here in North Yorkshire Police, what does that mean to me? It means to me delivering a high quality police service. And that's reflected in the fact that that service has to be bespoke to the individual or community that we're delivering it to, because everybody's needs are different. So a very good service doesn't mean the same things to everybody in our communities, because it depends on what the needs of those communities and individuals are. So we have to make sure that it's fit for purpose for their needs. It has to be the highest standards across every part of the organisation. So when someone does have contact with us, those standards relate to every part of the organisation, and not just frontline visible policing that can be seen by the public, for example, but there are other services that are required. So to deliver an effective operational visible police service, our enabling and support services also need to be exemplary. It also relates to delivery of service that cannot be seen. So covert work, safeguarding online, for example, of child sexual abuse, really important aspect of our business. but it might not be visibly seen by the public. That also has to be exemplary. Those things keep us safe from harm. And it also has to include partners. So some people who contact the police require a service from another organisation to meet their needs. And the police are not the primary agency. We don't have the skills or the responsibility or delivery of that service. And therefore, in order to deliver an exemplary service to North Yorkshire and our communities, when someone calls the police, the relevant partner agency also has to be responsive and deliver an exemplary service. So I think the most effective way for me to articulate what exemplary means in practice is to describe the service standards I aspire to for North Yorkshire Police. So next slide, please, Simon. So how does it actually feel? When you call us on either 999 or 101, we should answer quickly, professionally, and respond to your needs in a way that's appropriate in resolving your query or report. We want to make sure there are alternative ways for you to interact with us to report something that meet your needs, such as online or in person, and that we record and assess your details and your circumstances accurately. When we have an interaction with you, we act with fairness and integrity. We use our powers appropriately. We understand and respect the impact that our actions are having on you, whether you are a victim or a witness, a perpetrator, or in any other context. To do that, we need to have access to the most up-to-date information. So we make appropriate use of that information to make decisions that prevent you coming to harm in the first place. So we look for opportunities to provide longer-term solutions. We solve problems at source with partners. We stop bad things happening in the future, and we protect vulnerable people before they can come to harm. It means it feels like we're actively and regularly engaging with you and listening to you and your concerns, and we act to resolve those concerns quickly. When you report a crime, we're responsive. We take every opportunity to tackle offending, secure evidence, investigate the incident in the most appropriate way, and pursue offenders to secure a prosecution or other positive resolution. Our people understand how well they're performing in all core aspects of policing, from the speed we answer the telephone to how quickly we attend the scene of an incident and the numbers of arrests and prosecutions for a whole range of offences. So in order for us to deliver that very best service, our people have to be recruited, vetted, trained, skills, and have the right ethics and values and kit and equipment and ability to deliver the very highest standards of service in everything that they do, every single day. When things go wrong, we investigate and learn from our mistakes, that we're candid about what went wrong, and we apologise quickly and put things right. That's how it should feel if you're receiving an exemplary service from North Yorkshire Police. Next slide, please, Simon. But how do we achieve this? It requires action for it to feel like that, for us to deliver that exemplary service. We're already delivering an exemplary service in some aspects of our service, but there is more work to do. So we already have a comprehensive prevention and early intervention strategy and delivery of services in a way that prevents harm, but I'll speak more about this later on. We're improving our care for victims through a variety of service improvements like customer contact and digital forensics, and the comprehensive suite of commissioned services which are provided by the Commissioner's Office and through our witness care units. In a modern policing world, it's recognised that almost every case involves some degree of digital footprint, which adds complexity to an investigation. So our digital forensics unit is dealing with an ever-growing volume of demand. So we're coping with resourcing gaps as a result of the marketplace for those digital forensic skills. So we've invested in digital vans. We visit scenes to triage so that equipment can be examined more swiftly, and we comply with the return of rape victim telephones within 24 hours in line with the national standards. We need to value our people, so we have identified some gaps in developing and valuing our people, and this has led to us rolling out the First Line Leaders programme. So that's already established, it's being delivered, we've got an ongoing commitment to leadership development at all levels, ranks and grades. So we need to invest in our leaders so our people feel more valued and therefore they deliver a better service to you because of their training skills and that feeling of value that they give to the service and the people that they supervise. So we've already invested in this. We've invested in continuous professional development, and our First Line Leaders programme was launched in January. It's a 3-day programme. We've already run 6 sessions, so 60 officers and staff have already been through that programme. And although we've started with First Line Leaders, we're also working with the College of Policing, developing a Midline Leaders programme as well. And a representative of the Chief Officer team have joined the attendees of that course. So the First Line Leaders sessions and the chief officers go and have that interaction at the start of the session, set our expectations, set some of the vision, mission, values that we want to see in our first line leaders. And having that contact with those frontline leaders provides an additional context. So that's why this programme of work is so important. We've also recognised the national shortage of detectives, which also affects us locally here in North Yorkshire. To combat this, we're already thinking of new ways to attract and recruit into hard to fill detective roles. So we launched our direct entry detective programme last year, and our new cohort of recruits are starting their training next week. So I met them all at an induction evening a couple of weeks ago. 26 very committed, dedicated individuals who are going to step in to policing and become those experienced detectives. But to protect the public from harm, we have to pursue offenders and target criminals. And that's why our daily meetings on commands identify our most wanted, so that we can investigate those crimes and bring offenders to justice. So we've got dedicated investigation teams, criminal investigation departments who carry out high quality investigations. We've got a criminal justice department to ensure that file quality is improved, and that leads to the successful prosecution of offenders or bringing offenders to justice. And our Commissioner chairs the local criminal justice partnership, and that ensures that we continue to make improvements across the whole criminal justice system. But we've got more work to do. So on to the next slide, please, Simon, which just describes a little bit about the future plan. So again, it's just this continuous strive to improve those services so that we do become very good, we become an exemplar. So there's a comprehensive plan to deliver the vision. We're already planning the future in relation to our workforce, funding, and the improvements in service, some of which I've talked about. And we need to use our funding in the most cost-effective and value for money way in delivering those policing services to our communities. So we've recruited up to and beyond our national police uplift target of 1645. So we'll be at a higher number than that by the 31st of March, and we will maintain those numbers throughout the next 12 months. And we've changed the way that our probationer programme works to make sure that you see and feel those uniformed officers on the front line more quickly. So we've amended our programme to make sure that they land on the front line more quickly onto those response teams and those visible policing resources that are coming out into your communities. Our customer contact service will receive an investment of 1.85 million, with thanks to the Commissioner, to enable staff to continue to be recruited and do some systems upgrades that will improve our speed of handling your calls. So we want to deliver that level of service that is the top of the national standards. And we know we're not there at the moment. We're already having a positive effect. So we've recruited 24 staff. They're in and being trained, and there are an additional 2 more cohorts of those staff, call handling dispatchers coming in to the organisation during this year. Digital forensics units I've already mentioned. We've committed to a 50% reduction in our backlog by the end of June. So to achieve this, we're investing £400,000 to outsource some of our digital forensics work, because our internal service, albeit is of a very high standard and is accredited nationally, which is a real achievement, because some forces are not yet accredited. They're full, basically, but we want to make sure that those digital forensics are passed through quickly, because then we can give a better service to victims, get cases to court more quickly, and deal with that internal demand by investing that money in getting the equipment examined more quickly. In relation to safeguarding, in phase 1, we're increasing the safeguarding budget to add 21 posts to that team. It's expected a further phase of resources will be required. once we start to embed those. And that's why we're doing an organisational review this year to shape the organisation to ensure that we're delivering the very best possible service in those highest areas of harm, those highly visible areas of policing that make you feel safe and can keep you safe in our county. Those additional positions will enable areas identified to be more resilient. So you've heard about the National Child Protection Inspection. That will help to resolve some of those areas that require improvement from our NCPI inspection and provide confidence in those that are supported through various safeguarding teams. As I've already mentioned, we're investing in our leadership programmes and we're progressing our detective recruitment. But to address retention of detectives already in post, because again, it's a really tough job, it's a complex landscape, and people step out of being a detective because of those demands. We've agreed to pay a time-limited targeted variable payment. This is a national scheme, and it's already being paid to detectives in other forces, and they're finding the benefits of paying those variable payments to those detectives in retaining those expert skills in those teams. So tried and tested in other forces, we're implementing it here to keep people and their skills in those critical investigation roles. There are, of course, a multitude of further actions in our input in future meetings. So I did say that I was going to come back to prevention and early intervention, and I'm really mindful of the time. So next slide, please, and this is my last slide. Thank you, Simon. So the reason I've come back to this at the end of the presentation about the vision for policing is I truly believe and have a passion for prevention and early intervention because it is the most important part of our current improvement and future plans to deliver an exemplary service to our communities. Most of the things I've talked about are reactive, and they relate to the symptoms that emerge when a person has been let down by other factors in society, other services failing them, life failing them, and we can deliver an exemplary service in response to bad things happening. But we'll never take away the hurt or the harm completely from the victim of that incident or crime. And that is why the best solution, the best way to deliver a policing service and it be exemplary is prevention rather than cure. Providing a service in response to an issue is expensive and often ineffective. That's why it's so important for us to prevent harm in the first place. So we have a comprehensive prevention and early intervention strategy. It's being delivered through these 4 key work streams that you can see on the screen. I won't talk in detail about them because of the time, but basically a longer term problem solving approach to initial calls for service through our initial inquiry team connected to the control room. So when you call, we try and problem solve the longer term issue rather than a reactive cyclical response to a matter that keeps coming up over and over again. We've got more accurate and available information now through our new briefing system, North Yorkshire Eye, so we can make sure we're in the right places at the right time to prevent harm as a result of that accurate, more holistic, more detailed, a breadth of information that can be used by our officers and staff to be in the right place for you. We've provided access to the most appropriate agencies to support and assist with longer-term solutions to someone's needs. So a pathways directory so that we know what agencies are out there. Officers and staff dealing with issues can access those agencies quickly to get you the best help from the right organisation at the earliest possible opportunity in the chain of events. And of course, we can't do any of this without partnership working. So working more closely with partners in bespoke locations to provide a more holistic overarching solution to a community issue or an individual challenge to reduce that harm in that community with partners in a location that's bespoke to you. So to reduce or prevent crime and harm in those locations or in respect of a focus on an individual, but services coming together to provide that more overarching response to that issue and provide the longer term support. So all in all, lots of activity already going on and in place, lots of plans in place to then continue to develop those improved services in line with the national requirements, in line with regional issues, but more importantly, in the local delivery of services to you so that we can keep you safe and make you feel safe through the highest possible standards of service being delivered by North Yorkshire Police. And I will pause there, Commissioner, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Lisa, and thank you for that. So I'm really going to open it out to all the public that are watching today to be able to put their questions to you. This is really informing the public of what your vision is for North Yorkshire Police going forward. But I think it's important that we touch a little bit on the strategic policing requirement that was announced this week by the government, and show how we are already ahead of the curve here. So especially around the violence against women and girls. And could you just talk a little bit about that strategy, if that's all right?
Absolutely, Commissioner. And I think it's really important to say that it starts at the top and in partnership. So with yourself setting up a partnership arrangement for violence against women and girls, because of course, as I've said in my presentation, an exemplary service has to involve partners, and the strategic meeting that you've set up and the partnership VOG plan that I know is out there and is available for people to look at and is published, talks about that approach across the service. So it's a little bit like No Wrong Door, where there's been great research and recognition of the No Wrong Door scheme here in North Yorkshire, that it doesn't matter where you touch the system, with any agency or in any way, if it's violence against women and girls, you will be then wrapped around and a service will be provided no matter where you touch that service. Because of course, violence against women and girls affects people in many different ways, and they might not want to come to the police because of fear of further violence, retribution by the partner that's causing the violence. So of course, it's important that we have that partnership approach, and you've adopted that from your office. Then delving into the police VOG strategy. So nationally, there is a police VOG strategy sitting within that partnership approach and a North Yorkshire Police strategy. And that has a number of strands. And those strands are both outward and internal aspects. Outwardly looking, how do we make sure you can access the services that you need? So do you feel confident in contacting the police, making sure we take your report seriously? We look at Operation Soteria, which is a completely separate piece of work, but linked. So that is about a rape victim or sexual offence victim coming forward and us focusing on the perpetrator and the harm. Because of course, some rape victims feel that they are being blamed for what's taken place, or the focus is on their behaviour, and that's not right. Operation Soteria puts the focus back on the harm that's been caused to that person. So that's part of the external facing and trust and confidence for the public to come forward, that they will be looked after, they will be believed, that they will experience a thorough investigation, and the support services that can help them will be there to wrap around them when they report a sexual offence or violence or any harm in that respect. The strategy is also about internal focus. So we've seen the erosion of trust and confidence in policing because of the behaviours that are unacceptable in policing. So some of those horrific incidents that I won't rehearse here, where police officers have been accused of the most horrific crimes and offences and behaviour towards people in society. And that's not tolerated. So it's been made really clear inside the organisation that behaviour won't be tolerated. We react quickly to those internal reports of behaviour that are either indicators that somebody has those inappropriate behaviours, or more overtly, when offences or incidents are reported to us, that we act quickly. And there have been a number of occasions, I'm sad to say, in North Yorkshire where we have had reports, and I have held a number of and they're public facing, gross misconduct hearings where individuals have been dismissed or would have been dismissed if they hadn't already left the service, specifically for offences of this nature, which sends a really clear signal that it won't be tolerated here.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And I was delighted last year to be able to publish my own strategy, Violence Against Women and Girls 2, and create my partnership board with partners as well. So that's a really great piece of work last year. So we're already ahead of the curve there. So that's brilliant. Okay. Well, as I say, I'm going to throw it out to all public, but I can see that Simon wants to come in with a question too. Simon.
Thank you, Commissioner. And Lisa, this is not to pose for the in the public domain one of those sort of fiendish questions that we spend a lot of our time in, for example, the Executive Board deliberating. But I think it might be a good opportunity, perhaps, if you're willing to do so, to just share your thoughts with the public about the risks that are on your mind in terms of the path forward to achieving your vision, and how you and your colleagues in the force intend to manage those risks. And secondly, given that we have, of course, just come through the budgetary and precepting round, how you propose to extract maximum value out of every penny of the money entrusted by the public to North Yorkshire Police. That's not because we don't regularly have these discussions. Plainly, we do, but we're live in public, and it might just be helpful to have those exchanges for a few minutes now, with the Commissioner's permission.
Of course.
No, thank you, Simon. And I will keep it high level, because I am mindful that some of those conversations we have at Executive Board, of course, are very sensitive issues that I'm not at liberty to disclose in a public forum. But so please come back to me, Simon, if there are specific things that I don't mention that you had in mind. So I'm going to start with the funding. So quite rightly, and has been a public meeting of the Police and Crime Panel, all police forces nationally have funding pressures this forthcoming financial year. So it won't have escaped people that inflation is affecting everybody in our community, and we're really alive to that. And I know these were serious considerations that the Commissioner took in her precept consultations about the impact that would have on the public, because they too are under financial pressures. So in policing terms, inflation and broadly inflation and the pay rise for policing, which nationally, so this is not just a North Yorkshire issue, nationally was set in the budget planning, because we plan for 5 years in the medium-term financial plan and beyond that, but broadly over 5 years was set to be 2.5%. And of course, we know that the independent pay review bodies awarded 5% to policing. And given more than 80% of our budget is spent on people, a 5% pay increase versus a budgeted position of 2.5%, of course, obviously leaves a gap, which is a significant gap. And then to add to that, the gap created by the unexpected and unplanned, and I mean that in a national perspective, inflation, that we are an organisation that has lots of assets, buildings, we have to heat those buildings, we have to pay for fuel in our cars to get out to our jobs. We're a very people-focused, people-facing active service. So it's very difficult to reduce the costs, the inflationary costs of some of those things. We can't stop doing some of those things that are impacted on by inflation like other companies or organisations might be able to. So both of those things put together have caused a gap in the budget. So that is the most significant challenge of being able to deliver a service with the resources that we have, given we have a smaller budget to do that. So roundabout, give or take, a £7 million gap in the budget for the forthcoming year, that is a big gap in our budget. However, I'd like to reassure the public that they will continue to see the delivery of service, because our focus is on frontline delivery of service in the highest harm areas. And that is why we are undertaking a review of the organisation, so that we shape to meet that budget, but we shape in a way that focuses on the visible, physical frontline service delivery that will keep our public safe and feeling safe. That piece of work will take place during the year in order to meet the budget this year, and also plan for some of those budget gaps that we know are coming in year 2 and year 3 that are actually growing at the moment. So that's the financial position. In terms of the other risks and challenges, I spoke about it a little bit in my vision presentation, just the growing complexity of policing. So one of the highest harm, horrific crimes that we've seen a massive increase in, particularly during COVID, is online child sexual abuse. And in order to combat that crime, that requires specialist skills. It requires people to be on a computer to protect those individuals. So that will feel as though those visible yellow jacket resources standing on your street corner to protect you. We are going to have to invest in some of those aspects of harm, high harm, that require those officers and staff and skilled people to be in the background. That doesn't mean they are not protecting you or delivering a service to you, but that is a high harm area where we have to invest in. So it's how we make sure you still feel safe out there in our communities, whilst we also protect people online. And you'll have seen, and the Commissioner has mentioned the strategic policing requirement. We clearly have organised immigration crime that is growing, and obviously we're trying to protect those individuals that come into our country for help from being exploited when they land here. We've seen fraud massively increasing, of course, here in North Yorkshire. That's a big challenge and a risk to us because we can't investigate our way through the fraud that's occurring. We have to prevent it, and we have to do that with other agencies. So there are millions of fraud victims nationally. We have, fortunately, a very nice community, very nice place that we police, but lots of people who maybe live in communities where they don't have that support. They might be elderly, and they are being targeted because they might not have that support around them. And we do know that those fraud victims, it has a massive impact on those fraud victims. And we have a wraparound again in North Yorkshire here, where we support people who've been victims of fraud that might get reported to Action Fraud, but we provide a follow-up with PCSOs to go and check on the welfare of those individuals. The complexity of some of those things, and then recruiting into skilled jobs that policing didn't need in the past. So I think some of the risk factors here are people who are digitally skilled, and they're lost to agencies and organisations that can pay a lot more money than public service. So we have recruitment challenges also, Simon, in terms of that risk factor policing of getting those skilled people into the organisation and retaining them when the labour market is obviously quite buoyant in respect of some of those specialist skills that we need. Off the top of my head, Simon, there's some of the things that obviously spring to mind in terms of some of those risks, complexities, challenges to us delivering that exemplary service to our communities. But if I've missed the point, so to speak, with some aspects that you really wanted me to cover, please point me in that direction and we can cover them.
No follow-up for this meeting, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you very much. And I just want to touch on about the money side of things, and that as the public's PFCC, I will always continue to hold to North Yorkshire Police to account to be absolutely as efficient as they can be and to squeeze every drop of value out of the public money going forward. So I think we need to move on now. So we're going to move on to public questions. So Simon, can you bring them up, please? And thank you very much, Lisa, for that. It's very informative. If there's any questions that come off the back of it, please, the public, to get in touch. And Simon, I'm going to ask you actually just to remind the public about how they can get in touch with us during this meeting and afterwards as well. Simon, could you do that, please? Lovely. Thanks very much, Simon. Okay, to the first question. So first of all, thank you very much for these questions. The first one comes from Mr. Cook from Harrogate. The term policing priorities often used by North Yorkshire Police. Please could you explain how policing priority is determined, what the current priorities are, and the input from the Police Fire and Crime Commissioner's office on that process? So obviously, Mr. Cook, I very much listen to communities about when shaping my priorities, which then are transferred into my plan. So I'll hand over. I think, Lisa, are you able to answer this one? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Mr. Cook, for your question. I'm more than happy to engage with you outside of this process to provide much more detail than I'm going to give now, because it's, again, quite a complex area. So I spoke about it a little bit in my presentation. So we'll start at the national. As you heard, there are national policing priorities in the strategic policing requirement and in things, we've talked about VOG at length there. So some of those policing priorities are what we're referring to in North Yorkshire Police. But of course, there are more localised priorities. So we have a force management statement. So that is an assessment of demand for lots of aspects of policing services, what capacity and capability we have in order to deliver against that demand, and therefore what our priorities are, because there are some areas that are high risk, but we have low capacity and capability to deliver. So they are a priority for us to resolve. So that might also be a priority for us. We have what's called our control strategy. So that comes out of a policing review, if you like, a statutory piece of work where we have to review the landscape. So partnership information intelligence, police information intelligence, and we come up with our policing requirement, and that policing requirement document, which uses a risk assessment, if you like, that's called MORILE. Again, I won't go, it's a management of risk in law enforcement is what it stands for. That is then used to set a control strategy. So we have a control strategy that sets priorities for the force at a force-wide level. And then locally, when you speak to your local policing teams, they also have priorities. So something is a high harm or highly reported, or there's a hotspot area in your community, that neighbourhood policing team might set a priority to tackle a hotspot in antisocial behaviour, for example. So you might see a local policing priority that is as local as a neighbourhood policing team to address something that's a priority. And of course, you'll have seen the priorities and objectives in the police and crime plan. So they also set out policing priorities for North Yorkshire. So there's lots and lots of different aspects and facets, if you like, to priority setting in policing. But if we can answer your question more specifically, if there was something very bespoke about that question, please let us know. Or more than happy to provide a more detailed resume of priority setting in policing and how that takes place.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Okay, so the next question is from Gwen Swinburne. So hello to Gwen. Hi Zoe, it's now nearly 3 years, meaning the last draft Joint Committee annual report was for the year ended March 2020. What is going on, please? So I'll hand this over to Simon, my Chief Exec from my office, to answer.
Thank you, Zoe. So this particular question relates to the arrangements for Joint Audit Committee provision, which is a specific body committee that operates in an oversight and advisory capacity for the Chief Constable and for the Commissioner in respect of, amongst other things, financial corporate governance, ethics, and overall corporate health. And the question which Ms. Swinburne has posed relates to the non-mandatory but best practice element of audit committee business, which is to publish an annual report. So just to cover that ground again, audit committees don't have to prepare an annual report, but it is considered good practice to do so. And in most years, North Yorkshire's Joint Independent Audit Committee has done so. It didn't do so in 2021 for reasons relating to changes in the membership and chairing arrangements for the committee. And also, I suspect that was indirectly or directly connected with some of the difficulties that many committee infrastructures had throughout the period most intensely affected by COVID-19. So there is, and Ms. Swinburne is correct, there is one audit committee annual report that isn't there. However, in relation to the preceding year's audit committee annual report, it had been considered by the committee, but it hadn't been published as part and parcel of our roundup on the website, and that has now been corrected. So it was amongst the committee papers, but it hadn't been lifted out and made fully accessible on that section on the website. So we've put that right. And as Ms Swinburne will know, colleagues in the office have directly fed back on Twitter in respect of that.
Okay, thank you very much, Simon. So here's another question from Gwen Swinburne as well. Hi, Zoe. In view of this poor internal audit on payroll, can you clarify how much has been overpaid to staff, police in error? Are you confident these failings have all been addressed? And are you content with key records are still being held on Excel? Simon, I'd like to pass that to you again, please, to answer.
Yeah, thank you. So this relates to another area of joint independent audit committee activity, which is to receive and to scrutinise and to assist you, Commissioner, and you, Chief Constable, with driving forward progress in respect of audit, internal audit, and for that matter, external audit findings. So in that sense, the committee do work on your behalf. So all of the questions which Ms Swinburne has asked form part of the meat and drink of the work in that respect of the audit committee, and it's important that we allow those procedures to run their proper course, because that's what they're there to do, and to do so with complete independence of mind as well. And so what I suggest in relation to this question is that we give the public, including Ms Swinburne, the encouragement to monitor the progress that the audit committee make in that respect, and the material that we publish about the work that's done to respond to internal audit reports. And Commissioner, at your discretion, if you'd like to bring this particular question back when that process has run its course for a fuller answer in this forum, then I'm quite certain that would be possible and would represent abundance of transparency. So happy to put that on the forward work programme, so to speak, for a fuller answer later on when the process has run its course.
Yeah, absolutely, Simon, if we can do that, please. Right, so it's a question that's been asked for quite a lot of myself, actually, and also into my office too. And that's, we've received concerns from residents that North Yorkshire Police have failed to investigate a wildlife crime regarding the poisoning of a red kite in 2021. So could I ask the North Yorkshire Police if they could provide a public response to this specific incident? Thank you. And can I hand over to Alex for this one, please?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Yes, become aware of this in the last 48 hours, and we've conducted a review through our rural task force in relation to this. There's definitely some learning to be taken, both for ourselves and our partnership working with the RSPB. What I can say is that when it was first reported to North Yorkshire Police, it wasn't reported through the correct channels and wasn't reported initially as a crime. Subsequently, North Yorkshire Police have become aware that following some testing conducted by RSPB, that particular red kite had been poisoned. That was several months after the incident. There are some issues over evidential chains and opportunities for what is already a very difficult crime to prove. Where did the poisoning take place? What the location, and opportunities for investigative opportunities to lead to prosecutions. Very challenging area of business that I'll include in the presentation. So Rural Task Force Inspectors meeting with the RSPB to understand how we can better communicate and make those clear opportunities that when information comes into light, the correct channels to report, so we can put in that effective response and take all opportunities for investigation early on for the best possible chance of any prosecutions. But later in my presentation, I'll cover what the current picture in North Yorkshire looks like and some of the ways that we're trying to improve intelligence gathering to improve our prosecution rates in that area.
Thank you very much, Alex. And there was a parish council complaint you're going to have be able to feedback on as well, please.
Yes, that's in relation to poaching. It's, I believe it was Councillor Mark Waters. I think John might be able to confirm confirm there in relation to a poaching issue just on the some of the areas on the fringes of York. There is a problem-solving plan being put in place in relation to that, again supported by our rural task force. Following becoming aware of that, we did put some enhanced patrols into that area led by our rural task force and engage with the rural communities. Those farming communities that we engage with didn't explain a problem, but clearly there is a feeling that there is a problem. So we need to engage more to understand what that is so we can put the effective responses, because the feeling and the reality that we're seeing is something different. But at the moment, again, I'll come through on the presentation some of the challenges that we've got on the south border in relation to rural crime and the effort that we've got in relation to tackling that. But conversations all going with that particular community so we can listen and understand.
Thank you. Amanda, did you want to come in on this as well, please?
Thank you, Commissioner. I just wanted to add to that as well that I am aware that our complaints and recognition team are actively working with Superintendent Norton on this area as well. As Alex Butterfield mentioned there is a problem-solving plan that has been created, which includes resourcing and work to task the rural task force and introducing measures that can be taken by the community to try and help and alleviate some of those problems being experienced. So hopefully we'll touch on that a bit later in the presentation.
Thank you, Alex, and thanks very much, Amanda. Okay, let's go to the next agenda item, which is agenda item, where are we now? 4, and that's the presentation today from North Yorkshire Police on rural and wildlife crime. So, Alex, I'd like to invite you again, please. And what we'll do, Alex, is we'll ask questions as we go along, if that's all right.
That's fine. I'll just share the presentation now. Hopefully that's appeared on the screen.
It has, yes.
Lovely, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chief Inspector Alex Butterfield from North Yorkshire Police. I have the pleasure and responsibility of leading our Specialist Operations Department, which includes our Rural Task Force. So today I'm going to deliver a presentation that hopefully will update and inform you and reassure the public of North Yorkshire around what the current challenges there are from a rural and wildlife crime perspective and the approaches that we're taking to keep our rural communities a safe place to live. So I'm going to cover off what that picture looks like and the challenges that we have around recording rural and wildlife crime. I'm going to talk about the Rural Task Force and its capability and some of the impacts that that team are having and also some of the opportunities and challenges that we've got around intelligence to ensure that we're in the right place at the right time, looking at the right people. So in relation to this, what the picture looks like in North Yorkshire from a rural crime perspective. If we talk first of all around the challenges of recording crime, rural crime and wildlife crime, some of these crimes are not recordable crimes that are easily accessible for the police to pull out of police systems and understand and interpret. So what North Yorkshire Police have done is, as part of the investment into rural crime, is have this dedicated rural task force, which has a rural crime coordinator and processes in place to review all rural crimes and all wildlife crimes on a daily basis. So we trawl those systems looking for those crimes and pulling them out, those incidents, to truly understand what the picture is. So we have that hub of information so we can be reactive and understand wider trends in that. And that's really helped through what we have is rural crime coordinators who oversee that. But some of the challenges, so the number one rural crime issue outside of general theft for rural communities in North Yorkshire is poaching. We've listened to our communities through the National Rural Crime Network surveys over recent years and through our engagement, and it's clear that the impact of poaching, hare coursing, the intimidation that the farming communities and the rural communities face, the damage to crops and gates and fields is significant. And this has really been something of a focus and change of how we're approaching this particular crime type in North Yorkshire, which I'll come on to later in the presentation. From a wildlife crime perspective, we've talked just a moment ago on that particular red kite issue. The killing of birds of prey is a real challenge for North Yorkshire. Birds of prey like to visit North Yorkshire because of its environment and its geography. So it's an attractive place for those animals to come and live. Now, the historic position, and we get this information from our police systems, but also from the assistance of the RSPB through their annual bird crime report, is that North Yorkshire has been consistently at the top of the number of incidents that have happened of birds that have been persecuted. And it's not a great place to be. And there's been over many years Operation Owl, which is a dedicated operation around engaging with rural communities to be our eyes and ears to report incidents. What we're starting to see now is, for the first time, we're not that worst place in the UK anymore, but we're still featuring in the top 3 with 10 incidents that were included in the last report. At the end of this presentation, I'm going to talk about some opportunities that we've got to improve the intelligence flow, because, like I said before, this is an extremely difficult crime to prove, to get through the courts and get prosecutions for, because of the nature of where they're committed in very, very rural locations. The next challenge for North Yorkshire is the cross-border criminality that we face. North Yorkshire is a very attractive place, unfortunately, for criminals to travel large distances to commit crimes. They're using not only the multiple of back roads into our county, but also we've got the main A1M routes and A roads through the county. We've also got, from a wildlife crime perspective, our environment in Richmondshire and Hambleton is very flat, so it's perfect from a hare coursing perspective. So we've got these large geography where we're bordered by counties that are less affluent, that are targeting North Yorkshire through burglaries, through targeting farms and rural communities, and that is a real challenge for us. At the moment, we are currently facing an issue over a spike in quad bike thefts. Now, the loss of a quad bike to a farming community at the wrong time of year can be extremely, extremely costly, and can be the difference between those farms being functional moving forward as a business. So it is important. It's not just a bit of a machinery, it's a bit of an entire business that connects a community together. So we're seeing this emerging trend at the moment at both the north and south of the county, where farms are being and businesses are being targeted. Now, we know that multiple organised crime groups are responsible for the majority of these. So it's been adopted at our force tasking as a force priority. So as a result of that, we're putting all our specialist ops resources in to tackle that. Not just your rural crime team, we've got our firearms supports team, our road policing teams, our operational support teams, as an enhancement to the local policing response. So we've got a problem-solving plan to understand that, look at prevention work and targeting, developing intelligence, and we've had some fantastic success stories. Only on the 10th of February, 3 quads were seen travelling on the A64. Pursuits began. We've ended up with our police helicopter, dog search, specialist op resources, getting a 16 and a 17-year-old in custody, and the stolen quads recovered. And again, last October, when we saw a similar spike, several OCG members were in our cells with a large number of quad bikes recovered. It's not just quad bikes, it can be all-terrain vehicles. and we're taking a comms approach to it as well. We've had 76 pieces of media content around quad bikes since the beginning of last year, with a reach of over 1 million people. So there are some key messages and opportunities that we need the farming community to take every step they can to secure their key bits of kit. I know that there are processes and efficiencies and putting the kit where you need it, but at this time, I'm putting my plea to rural communities to take every step you can to secure your assets, to make them more difficult to steal. We're working nationally with NPCC and rural crime leads in relation to a private members bill with Greg Smith MP in relation to getting manufacturers to make sure that farming equipment is more difficult to steal. So trying to design our way out of this problem, that because what we're seeing is these items aren't being loaded up and taken away, they're being driven away. So we need to make some of these items more difficult to steal. So that is some of the challenges, but I'll come back in more detail on the poaching. Any questions so far before I talk about the Rural Task Force?
Yes, Alex, I've got a couple of questions there. So we've just heard the Chief talk about prevention and early intervention. And I just wondered if you could just talk a little bit about any prevention activities you do with rural businesses. And the second question is, although I've just heard from you about the spike in quad bike theft, generally, what are the crimes that you see most of in the rural areas?
Yes, so I'll take the last one first. Poaching is the one that stands out alongside machinery theft. They're the crimes that really are our focus, and that's why we've designed the new operating model for the Rural Task Force to really focus our efforts in the key issues. And with that, with the makeup of the Rural Task Force, we have a team, a full complement now of PCSOs across our engagement tool that once they review the incidents that have occurred in North Yorkshire and are visiting victims of crime, they're taking every opportunity to visit those individuals to provide bespoke crime prevention advice around CCTV, opportunities with cages for certain equipment and just trackers, things like that. But in addition to that, it's that ongoing engagement, as well as the Safer Streets project that works with North Yorkshire Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner's Office around investment from the Home Office for certain rural communities to have alarms fitted, and that funding, especially at this time, as we've discussed, very challenging financial time for everybody, to get that leg up on certain crime prevention measures, and our PCSOs from the Rural Task Force and the local PCSOs across the southern end of the county have really supported that activity.
Thank you.
Rural Task Force. So just to explain who they are, they're an inspector. Clive Turner leads that team with 2 sergeants, 7 PCs and 7 PCSOs with 2 part-time rural crime coordinators. As you'll see from the map there, they're divided up into a number of areas there. So what their purpose really is to enhance the neighbourhood policing approach to North Yorkshire. So we have obviously the neighbourhood approach with our neighbourhood policing teams and response teams that are there. We needed to look at, we have 7 additional police officers, 7 additional police community support officers, of how they can enhance in those rural areas what we're providing. So huge geographical areas, and that's always the challenge in North Yorkshire. But we had to, we looked at the success of the Rural Task Force before, we listened to the communities, and we felt that there was a need for change to really make an impact on these key crime types. So just over a year ago, we after that review, we implemented a new operating model for the Rural Task Force. So the focus of that was to really target high harm offenders, focus on poaching, provide a 7-day-a-week tactical advice model to the force to assist other neighbourhood policing teams and response teams, pursue work with our rural communities and watch groups for proactive patrols, and work closely with our neighbouring forces to not just push the problem but try and solve some of these problems. So I'll give you an example of the pursuit of high harm offenders. So we have 10 poaching top targets currently and 9 acquisitive crime top targets, and our officers will take responsibility for those individuals, and we'll look at disruption methods, intelligence development. We'll travel out of the county to knock on the door and say we picked up on ANPR that you've got your vehicle, to just let them know that we're here, that we're watching, that they're of concern to us, and we will take every action possible to disrupt their criminal activities if we haven't got enough to arrest and pursue a prosecution with them. So we've got 12 months on, we've conducted a review of that, and I'm going to talk about some of the successes that we've had with changing the approach, not only to that, but the introduction of something called Op Figaro with poaching. But we've also had some opportunities of developing our partnership working and communication with rural communities. We've developed some very strong working relationships with our neighbouring forces that not have in the previously put enough focus on rural policing as much as we have put resource to. They're developing them. We're supporting other forces from around the country around our operating model and our rural task force. So we're just as well as engaging with our communities, and through the 25 watch groups with over 2,000 members, which is fantastic, really. We need the police can't do this on our own. We need the public. We need the public to be our eyes and ears. They need to be providing us with information, and allowing us to process that, build that picture, and respond to it immediately if necessary. We've also
Alex,
got the... Sorry.
Just a question on, can you give me an example about how you work with our neighbouring forces? Because we're crime importers here in North Yorkshire. You know, quite a lot of the criminals come across the border. So how do we work them? Intelligence sharing, really, going now and going forward. How can we improve that too?
So the example I can give is a current one in relation to the quad bike thefts. So it's not that are happening predominantly at the bottom end of the county. South Yorkshire and Humberside and West Yorkshire are experiencing exactly what we're seeing. These organised crime groups are not just targeting the rural communities of North Yorkshire, it is across the region. So we are sharing intelligence, we are working on proactive operations together to target the individuals that are not living on North Yorkshire. That's important to say. They're not individuals that are living in North Yorkshire. They are from our neighbouring forces. So we need to work with them closely to tackle that. What there has been, and it's later in the presentation, is an opportunity that's ongoing in relation to improving the intelligence sharing regionally, and we've been working with our NPCC colleagues up in Northumbria who lead on wildlife and rural crime, and there's some really good opportunities, not just through that but also through some Crime Stoppers funding that we've secured.
Thank you.
No problem. So poaching, Op Galileo and Op Figaro, and there must be some Queen's fan in our ops planning department. But yeah, hair coursing and poaching, number one rural crime issue outside of general theft. People spending travelling large distances to commit this crime, because the individuals that do commit this crime, they see it as a way of life, almost sport. Recreation, like some people may pick up a set of golf clubs. This is what they like to do. It's their way of life. It's not acceptable. Won't be tolerated in North Yorkshire, and the disruption to the rural communities as well as the wildlife crime itself is completely unacceptable. Op Galileo is the name of the national approach to tackling hair coursing, and there are a number of proactive operations that go on up and down the country, as well as tackling issues with legislation that we've been dealing with over many years, and also sharing intelligence. Op Figaro is an approach that North Yorkshire began approximately a year and a half to 2 years ago, where we identify high harm offenders. And we take a fairways approach to this, using the criminal community protection warnings and community protection notices and the orders, in order to tackle these individuals where we feel there are gaps in legislation previously, or we don't have enough evidence to get prosecutions. We can use this legislation to make an impact on these offenders, whether they've committed a crime or we suspect that they've been committing these offences. I'm going to talk about some of the success of what this approach has taken, but the fantastic news is that the nine northern forces have all adopted this approach. So this is not us pushing the problem to other rural communities across the north of England. We've adopted this, and this has all been signed off at chief officer level across the nine forces, that we're all adopting this approach, so that the problem doesn't circle back to us in a couple of years, because it's getting pushed from force to force. It's a joined up approach to that. Now, in this next slide here, we're giving some an idea of how the Op Figaro approach is. And the focus on poaching is improving the picture for poaching in North Yorkshire. So 2020 to 2021, we had 1,275 incidents in relation to poaching. Through that period, Op Figaro process began, new operating model, and the following year that was reduced by 32% to down to 876 offences, which we were extremely happy with, to make such an impact and such a difference, but there's still work to do. And we're already, as we've learned from last season's poaching, we've and fine tuning and working on intelligence, we're already seeing, as you'll see on the chart on the bottom left there, 2022 2023 is well under where we were even on the improvements last year. So we need to keep that momentum. We need to keep that pressure on the individuals, because if they're committing poaching offences, the individuals are often linked to organised crime groups, could be involved in scoping for other offences, and this disruption is really keeping them out of the county. So to give a bit more depth, Op Figaro is a robust warning letter that's sent to them as stage 1. Stage 2 is followed up with a community protection warning. Stage 3 is a community protection notice. And then, as you'll see there, we've actually got to the point now in this where an individual by the name of Ryan Spence has worked his way through 1, 2, 3, and was convicted at Crown Court. Now, that was adjourned for appeal to today. I've had the update just prior to this meeting that he's withdrawn his appeal, so that conviction stands. So we do have that first CBO through that process, but it's clear from a reoffending perspective and a deterrent that these individuals who were on our top target list are not coming back into North Yorkshire because of where they feature on here, knowing that the repercussions of a community protection warning and notice, and eventually an order if breached, will result in criminal convictions. So we'll continue to learn from this process and develop it with our colleagues across the region. But we do feel that across North Yorkshire, this has been a success. However, we do, as we've just talked about, appreciate that certain communities will feel that their local issue doesn't feel like it's improved. And that's something that we've got to get into the detail of to understand, hopefully reassure and tackle those problems.
So Alex, can I ask you a question, how you're going to do that then? Because I do hear a lot from rural communities that maybe they don't feel the benefits of the reduction in poaching, and also about underreporting as well. And, you know, what's your advice to those that are watching right now, those communities?
No, absolutely. We've known for a number of years, particularly through the work of the National Rural Crime Network surveys, that there is a low confidence in rural, from a policing perspective, from our rural communities, and underreporting of crime. And that has been a message that unless the communities engage with us and tell us what the issues are, report these crimes, report these incidents of concerns, if we don't know it, then we can't understand and prioritise it. And in relation to understand it, we can take that information, it will be picked up by our rural task force, and then we can adjust our response and patrols and develop problem solving plans in particular areas where we feel it's proportionate to the level of what we understand the problem to be.
Thank you.
We use other information as well to understand what the impact that we're having in relation to our approach, and this is something that I've been tracking over a number of years. North Yorkshire's the North Yorkshire, well, most farming community use NFU Mutual as an insurance company, and they issue a rural crime report every year, and North Yorkshire always feature. And I was very pleased last time I gave this presentation about 15 months ago to say that we were showing further improvement, and there was a drop. What we've seen since is that in the 2021 report that North Yorkshire insurance claims in North Yorkshire dropped from 2.2 million to 1.2 million, a massive 41% drop. We in the 22 report we do not feature in the top 10. And that's the first time I recall this happening. So we have requested, and I've requested again through the NPCC and NFU Mutual, access to understand that in greater detail. I'm waiting a response, but not featuring at all appears to be good news. It's another avenue to understand, are we making an impact if claims aren't being made. So in relation to intelligence, we have got some real challenges. Rural communities, like I said, we can't be everywhere. The geography often defeats us when policing North Yorkshire. We need the community's support, not only eyes and ears, but we need to understand particular crime problems. Like poaching, which are difficult groups to get into, to understand who's committing what and where, but also, like I said before, on persecution of and the killing of birds of prey. So we've secured £6,000 of funding for some bespoke Crime Stoppers funding for a campaign that we're working with our partners to at the moment to understand what the best approach would be to land that, to get information about birds of prey that have been trapped, poisoned, shot, and how we can get that information out so we can better understand and tackle the problem. So I'm really interested to see how that develops, and hopefully some success through securing that funding. The regional intelligence approach. So we've had previous challenges around intelligence sharing between forces. There's been a development through NPCC and our North East Regional Rural Group to secure processes in order to do this, including an IT platform, which will make it more effective and intelligence-led, and could be potentially groundbreaking in the intelligence world for sharing this information on this crime type. But it is a gap for us, and it needs investment, and they've just secured some funding for a coordinator to be involved in that, and I understand a very strong candidate for the position just happens to be our rural crime coordinator. So there may be an opportunity for that individual to move into that space, of which he's already linked, and do it permanently, but work within North Yorkshire and the Rural Task Force as well. So we're at the front hand of first in line for that new way of working and benefiting from that improved intelligence approach. So in summary, what's working well? We feel that the new operating model is making improvements in some of the key rural crime types in North Yorkshire, particularly poaching. The challenges remain cross-border criminality, particularly quad bike and farm machinery theft at this moment in time. The opportunities, we talked about intelligence, improving that intelligence and information sharing. We've also, there's been some vacancies in the Rural Task Force over recent years that we've been able to improve staffing there and get some good coverage across the force. But there's also, and Mr. Foskett's online at the moment. Today he's authorised a new comms piece in relation to really pushing our North Yorkshire community messaging service, which we've already got 12,000 sign-ups. But this is information that we can tap into to not only understand what's happening, but the feeling of communities, so we can tailor our response from that. So that's going to be developed. So we hope that the rural communities will engage with that when we're in a position to share more information, and hopefully encourage the rural communities to sign up to that. So what are we aiming for? In all honesty, I want to make this a hostile environment for criminals to come and visit North Yorkshire, whether they're at home in their own counties. We'll come and visit you. We're going to make life difficult for you. Every evening we have specialist resources in advanced cars with advanced driving skills to be able to take on that challenge of pursuing individuals that are intent in targeting our rural communities. And that is a daily focus through our daily management meetings. Is at the moment it is very focused on the people in custody, and we're also aiming to continue with the improvements around driving this poaching problem down, and through the improved intelligence picture, hopefully. So the results that we expect in the 12 months is that we would want that current trend of poaching to continue, and that's supported through improvements in our development of intelligence and sharing of intelligence. I'm happy to take any further questions.
Thanks very much, Alex. And, it is actually fantastic that there has been a great reduction in poaching. So really well done for that. And I'm interested to ask a little bit around the Rural Watch, because I wonder if there's going to be a review of it at all. You're talking about community messenger. I don't know, Elliot, if you want to come in on this, but the Rural Watch is something that, you have a lot of members on. Does it work effectively?
Well, I'll let Alex pick up the Rural Watch part of it, and I'll pick up the community messaging, if that's all right, Commissioner. Alex?
Yeah, Rural Watch, I see it as a huge success. The sheer numbers speak for themselves. Some groups are more developed than others. These are community-led watch groups that police are a part of, and there's varying degrees of activity between the groups, so there'll be and success will follow. But with regards to that, I would say if there are any specific concerns from groups, our officers should be picking up on them. But if they're not, I would love them to be flagged with us, so we can go and for the individuals that are linked into those through our Safe and Neighbourhood teams or Rural Task Force, to just try and revive those particular groups and encourage some of the members to get involved.
Thank you for that. Sorry, Elliot, I'll just jump in and say that I have reached out to Rural Watch leaders to have conversations with them, bring them together to see if we can improve that and how we can work with them, with the communities, to give that additional support. So that's something that we'll be having a conversation about in the future. Elliot.
Excellent.
Yeah, and just briefly, Commissioner, the community messenger this morning, we had an operations delivery board which incorporates a lot of areas of policing, and the partnership hub brought the community messenger to that meeting to say, look, we've had some significant successes with this. Other forces have done some brilliant work with this as well. We think it's time to actually put our foot on the gas with this now and really accelerate it. So today I've asked for our communications department to work up a new plan so that it's not just falling to Alex's team and to local officers to try and recruit people into that, because it's really, you're only going to reach so many people doing that. So we'll see a much greater communications push once we've got the right branding, the right thing in place for it, which will help really connect us with those communities, and in particular communities that we find we struggle sometimes to reach, like the rural communities, because of the disparate geography involved in it.
Yeah, I'm really pleased to hear that. Thank you, Elliot, for that update. I mean, Alex, there is, I do get a lot of comments about instances where just single police officers or PCSOs have turned up to jobs where there's been poaching on farms, and that there've been complaints maybe about, is that enough resource to be sending, or is that the right resource to be sending? And I wonder what your answer is to that.
Yeah, it very much depends on what's happening in the force at that time. The challenges that were the type of incidents will always be assessed through threat, harm and risk. And again, the geography is a real challenge. This is where we've got to look at our internal processes like force tasking, like our force DMM, to ensure that we're responding to the latest information and trends to get our resources in the right place. It won't always be what meet everybody's expectation, but what we'll try to do is send the nearest resource, and then that will be followed up by the rural task force in most cases, to be able to understand if there are other opportunities with rural crime that may have, if a police attendant hasn't been required at the time and that's been the assessment, we will always look at the rural task force, will review those incidents and jobs to make sure there aren't any missed opportunities, or it's part of a bigger picture that we can add some value to.
Elliot, can I bring you in?
Yeah, and it's just really to just layer on top of that, Commissioner, and for everybody, just that our force daily management meeting is chaired by a chief officer every day. So anything that happens overnight, whether that's rural or city, we move our resources to deal with the problems that are emerging. So we're not waiting. We're not saying, okay, so we've got a burglary problem in say Selby, and we leave all our resources there for the month while we wait for next. So we do that. We're really responsive, and then in the evening now we have yet another what we call a pace setter meeting, which ensures that we've got our resources in the right place at the right time, and that's chaired by a senior officer too. So we are far more flexible around our resourcing of problems. And just today we've seen a slight increase in theft of motor vehicle, what we call 2-in-1 burglaries, where they'll break into a house, steal the keys, whatever, and off they go in the vehicle. And we were able to move our resources around from our specialist ops team today, from roads policing, etc., to tackle that crime that's happening. So we try and make that preventative approach, so we don't continue to see those problems exacerbated as we go through.
I think that we could talk about this subject an awful lot, and I'm very mindful of time here. But thank you so much, Alex, for coming. And I believe there is a question, another public question, which we'll come to in agenda item 6 after the performance update. So thanks very much again. So Elliot, are we coming to you for the performance update?
I believe you are, Commissioner. I'll try and share my screen, so just bear with me a second. Hopefully, with a bit of luck, you can all see that.
We can, yes.
Brilliant, thank you. But clearly I can't see you, so if you've got any questions, please leap in, and I will try and tackle this with my trademark brevity to move us on as we can. So emergency calls, then you will see these are the calls that are 999 calls made to police, and we focus on these every month, and you'll have seen a huge push on this, and you know the priority that the force places on answering our emergency calls. And what you can see here, from this graph is the amount of calls that are answered now in under 10 seconds, which is where we want to be, are a significant improvements for us. And if we look back at where we were at kind of this time last year, we were only managing to get to around about 35-40% of our calls in that time frame, and we're now over 70% and rising, and that's where we absolutely see ourselves being going forward. So although it says average answer time here 12 seconds for January, it's like just this morning I think it was 6 seconds overnight, and those are regularly now the times that we're seeing. And it's so important for us to make sure that when people are ringing us on the 9s, it's the most desperate time of their lives most of the time, and that they want that telephone call answered really, really quickly. And that's what we're really now starting to see. So really pleased by that. I know you'll be equally pleased with that too.
Yes.
So we have seen a decrease of calls in January. We are in a bit of a slump around demand because it's that time of year, but we now start to see that rise again. And again, at Operations Board this morning, Commissioner, I commissioned a piece of work through for the Force Control Room to ensure that although we've got our recruitment, it's all going ahead, we've got what we would call a backup plan, so that if our demand then starts to outstrip our ability, we don't wait for that to get out of control again. We've got resource, we'll move into the control room, and that will assist us in answering those emergency calls. So I'm really reassured, and I'm sure the Chief will be really reassured as well by the direction of travel in that. So I'll throw that one out. There's always a contentious one on the emergency calls. Are there any questions on that slide?
No, I'm just really pleased that they're going the right way. So that's brilliant. Okay, good.
Yeah,
more work to be done though.
There's more work to be done, but I think you can see that significant improvement is brilliant, and we'll continue to keep our foot on the gas with that. So the non-emergency calls, the 101 calls, as you can see, we had an increase of 1,595 calls compared to last month, but we've got the decrease of average speed of answer by about 45 seconds. Again, still not where we want that to be, but as you can see down here, overall, we've had the huge amount of calls answered in under 10 seconds. So we are getting there with that. Our focus has been on the 9s, on the 909 calls, obviously. But what we are really cognizant of is that what we call failure demand. We don't want people ringing on 101, can't get through, and it escalates to a 999 emergency call too. So the focus is very much starting to shift as well to bring those call times down, and we will see that start to flatten as well, I'm convinced, in the coming months. Huge amount of work going on in the Force Control Room around that one. Is there any questions on that one?
No.
This is a really good news story for us, our policing response. So since November, we've had a much greater scrutiny on our response times, and in particular on our immediate responses. So those 999 calls come in, that's great, we're answering them really quickly, but what are we doing to make sure that we get there in time? And you can see from November 2022, you can see that all of them, immediate rural, our immediate urban, so the ones in our cities, and our priority grade incidents, they're all going up, and the direction of travel is still going up. And we would you can see what we call our service level agreements there, immediate urban 15 minutes, but actually in actual fact we get to those far quicker in most cases, but we will get some that will skew the mean and skew the average. For example, if we've got one that sits on our system as a lower grade but suddenly escalates, it adds time to it, etc. But it's a really good news story for us, and again it comes down to a huge amount of hard work in the Force Control Room, a huge amount of hard work by officers out on the ground to make sure that they are responding quickly and getting to those calls when people need us the most. The other bit on that slide you will see is in relation to our average officers per incident. Slight increase on last month there, but nothing really that's overly significant. You can still see that for our immediate, so our emergency ones, where we've got crime and public safety and welfare, you can see that we have more people going to those particular incidents than we would for, say, antisocial behaviour, but it's still above what we would do for a priority. You can see significantly greater resource put into that, but that's probably where I would see it, and it seems to be fairly static around those resources. Is there any questions on that slide?
Yeah, Elliot, can I ask you a question about response times? I mean, it's really good, but I would like to have an example of how you're improving it, so to get a better understanding of why they're improving. Does that make sense, Elliot?
Yes. So actually, every single morning now at our daily management meetings, we have a scrutiny on our response time. So we will understand. Let's say for each of the commands, so let's talk about, say, Scarborough, for example, and Rydale. Scarborough and Rydale will look at all of the emergency incidents they had overnight, which ones they got to within that time and which ones they didn't. And then they will scrutinise the ones that they didn't get to. What was the reason for it? Now, in a lot of cases, that can be something as simple as actually officers not telling the control room that they were on the scene at the time, so the control room have no idea that they've arrived at the time. And that could be for a multiple of reasons. Actually, sometimes they just forget because they're busy. Sometimes they launch straight into an emergency response and they forget for that reason. But we're really tightening up on that. Other times there may be things like what we would call observation messages that go out. So somebody might say, actually, this has happened, and we'll put observations out for a particular vehicle, and it might have gone on as an emergency response. We'll have done a search, but nobody's actually found that vehicle, and it will then say, well, they'll resume from it. So it might be a longer time, which will add to that overall time frame for an emergency incident. And sometimes, and again, it comes back to the point Alex was making, Commissioner, sometimes we have to accept that, our rural ones in particular may take us a little bit longer to get there. And when you're in challenging weather conditions in the winter, that can be difficult for officers. But, we endeavour to get to them. We also scrutinise any we didn't get to. And if there are ones that we never went to, we need to understand why. And then final category there, Commissioner, would be the ones where there's been that delay in dispatch. So an incident has come in and it's either then been upgraded to an emergency, and that is included in that time frame. So it might have sat there as we're working through it on a priority call for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then it's become an emergency and it gets upgraded. Then you've still got all of that delay built into our overall time frame for it. So that delay in dispatch getting it out there can happen. But the good news is for us, every single morning we scrutinise those, not just at the local command meetings, but at the force meeting as well. So myself, the other ACC and the Deputy Chief Constable, that between the three of us, we chair those daily meetings, and we've got that huge amount of scrutiny on it now, and it's paying dividends clearly, because we're obviously doing much better with it, much better.
Yeah, it's really good to see. Thank you, Elliot.
Thank you. So crime levels, there's nothing really within our crime levels that kind of stand out for me. You can see we get the usual slumps in the kind of March, April time for some reason, but then it'll always go up again in the summertime because we tend to get more, we get longer nights, we get people out more, we get an influx of people into our wonderful county, and crime does go up. What I've asked that we do though is look at these past three peaks here, and I've asked our analysts to pick out what crime types and where those happened, because we should be able to predict what we're likely to get in the summertime. So some of that might be antisocial behaviour, it might be violence against the person outside clubs, pubs, or whatever it is. But actually, we need to just understand that problem for the summer so that we're matching our crime prevention, our crime resources, and our response resources to try and flatten those peaks. And that's where I'd like to see us get to. So that'll be commissioned through our tasking process, Commissioner, and I'm happy to report back what we find from that.
Thank you.
The burglary and robbery, clearly you can see the rise in burglary residential there, which is not where we would hope to be. We always get a dip at certain points in the year, and I think at the start of the year there, and you'll see it again later on for vehicle crime, it was the last lockdown, it will always be lower. But what we've got here is what we would call a significant rise that is not one we want to sustain. Included in burglary residential, it's really important to say that these include shed breaks as well, what we could break into shed, because they're now counted in the Home Office counting as part of a residential property, and we have had an increase in shed breaks as well. So some of that will be contained in there, but it is fair to say that we have seen an increase in burglaries. We've got various problem profiles that for each of the areas where they're happening. And as you heard me talk about earlier on, we have our forced tasking. We've got Op Alibi running, which is looking at that rural burglary problem as well. And we've got put a huge amount of resource into that, and we're working cross-border with Cleveland around some of those as well. And I say a huge amount of work. Our specialist ops team are deployed day in, day out. So our roads policing, our operational support unit, our dogs, as I say, are deployed onto those operations. One of the things that we're currently doing as well is just checking with our head of crime, is just pulling out some training packages for forensic and scene preservation, because I think it's been a little while, it's fair to say, since we've refreshed that with our staff and our officers on the ground, just to make sure we're maximising not just the prevention side of it, Commissioner, but the opportunity to detect burglaries when they happen as well. And then the robbery graph at the bottom, we had an operation running Op Blighton. I forget what Op Caliber, forgive me, which I think you can see and that ran around November, December time, had a big impact on our robberies. And again, those hotspots are identified under there. We now regularly patrol. Neighbourhood policing have got them, and we would hope to see that stay as low as possible over coming months. And you can see that North Yorkshire, in any case, does not suffer badly with robbery from the person. So it's every single robbery is a traumatic event, but actually we don't see huge numbers of them. So which is great news as well.
Can I ask you a question on the burglary, please?
Yes, of course.
Elliot. And it's a worrying trend, isn't it? The upward trend there. And have we got any information as to the possible causes of this, and where in the county has it been happening? Are there any particular hotspots?
Yeah, so causes, it's really easy for us to we can speculate actually that you can link this potentially to financial pressures that people might find themselves under, and the cost of living, rising the cost of living. However, I can't evidence that here today. So what I've tasked out to our analysts is to do a problem profile. So look back at 2008. The last time we saw that kind of significant financial pressure on people, and understand in our calendar what happened and when. So what can we expect to see? So these burglaries here, for example, did we see the same thing last time, and what caused it? Because that's at the moment it's really hard to say. The other bit would be what can we predict that happened last time, the cost of living crisis. So if you remember, we saw a huge increase in metal thefts at one point because cost of living went, and we ended up with people, metal prices went up, etc. So what could we expect this time? So it's getting ahead of that. In relation to where they're happening in the county, that we had a bit of a spate of those 2-in-1 burglaries I talked about in Selby, and an operation called Op Blighton running there, and still running. And in fact, we've got specialist operations will be working in and around those areas, in the coming days, but tonight in particular as well. In relation to the coast, we talked about the rural premises around the Whitby area under Op Alibi, and working with Cleveland. We did see some of those. We saw a bit of targeting of rural premises in Pickering and Yeddingham, targeting outbuildings and sheds. So as I said, we start to see that rise in shed breaks. Unfortunately, our data, because they're all categorised as burglary residential, it's really difficult for us to separate out our shed burglaries from our residential burglaries. But we need to look at that, because if we're looking at a pattern of an increase in shed burglaries rather than domestic house burglaries, as it were, it's a very different impact to the person there. Yes, nobody wants their tools stolen from their shed, but it's far different than having somebody inside your own house as well. And then in relation to the county, again, we've seen an increase in some burglaries in the county, in the Dales area as well. And again, specialist ops working with them. It's not ideal, Commissioner. We would not want to see, I think last January was the second highest level of burglaries we've got. We know they always go up in the winter time with the longer nights, but it's not something we want to see sustained. And what we would look to see by next month is that coming down. So for February, that burglary figure hopefully coming down and staying low then. But we do need to understand the impact that the cost of living might have on the longer term trends.
Thank you. Can I bring Lisa in?
Thanks, Commissioner. I'll be brief, and it's just to follow up on Elliot's point. It's just such an impactive crime on victims, burglary, so it is really important. Very few key points from me. Just to reiterate Elliot's point there, residential burglary now includes outbuildings, so it could be, you know, technically if you live on a big plot, it could be a long way from your actual home address. Yes, it's impactive, but it's not the same as somebody actually physically being in your house. And so I just want to make that clear to people that this includes now sheds, outbuildings, garages, etc. So we do really need to tease out, and the analysts will do this, what is an actual dwelling occupied, because some of them of course are building sites where people break in to steal boilers, but they don't belong to anyone other than the building company, which is still bad. But again, it's that personal element of crime that it's boilers, for example, stolen out of unoccupied premises. So we'll tease that out and really get an understanding of which are the occupied dwellings. Secondly, the national drive to attend all dwelling burglaries we already go to. So when that national priority came out, North Yorkshire Police already go to all dwelling burglaries, so please be reassured we take this crime really seriously. Thirdly, I would say there are a very limited number of people who commit burglary. So generally, if we catch them for one, they're a good suspect for many others. So it's not one of those crimes like shoplifting where you get lots and lots of different offenders. Generally, you get a group of offenders and they are the people committing all of the burglaries. So I would just appeal to the public watching this call. If you know or suspect somebody is a burglar, please give us that information, because the likelihood of us protecting and preventing multiple victims of crime and harm as a result of us acting on that intelligence is very, very what's the word I'm thinking of? It's a multiplier, so to speak. So there's a big return on investment of us catching somebody because they tend to commit multiple crimes. So please, you know, we need that intelligence. There are people out there who know who people are who are burgling people's properties and then selling on goods. So it's really important to us so we can protect those people affected by it. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. And just to echo that at the end, you know, people who see what they believe to be stolen goods for sale, you know, we're not talking about the lovable Del Boy figures here. We're talking about people who are possibly responsible for the burglaries in the first place, and burglaries to people's homes. So, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. The violent crime trend is great. It continues to fall, and we've just commissioned our. Obviously, we've seen some significant and terrible incidents actually over the past week or so. What we're seeing with overall violent crime, though, is violent crime is down, and we're again hoping to flatten that peak for the summer months, which we generally see rise around nighttime economy and pub-related stuff and drink-related stuff in the summertime, I should say, rather than pubs. So that's good news there. The vehicle crime, still within where we would see our limits. It's not ideal. We have had a rise in vehicle crime, but we're not looking at massive figures for that. But it isn't, again, it's not great. I can't directly link that, again, Commissioner, to any kind of cost in living crisis. We do see a rise in vehicle crime around this year, and theft from or unauthorised taking of motor vehicles as well. And we've seen a few where we've had people steal the keys and break into a vehicle, not take the vehicle. They just want what's the contents inside. So coming back to the Chief's point is, again, just making sure with your vehicle, you're not leaving it running in the cold weather with the keys in it to heat it up and defrost it, because that's always a favourite, and B, don't be leaving anything valuable in it overnight. But again, relatively low numbers for the county of North Yorkshire compared to other forces, but again, not ideal for us at the moment.
I'm just mindful of time, Elliot. Could you just highlight anything on the further slides? How many slides have you got left to go?
The outcomes one, there's nothing really to highlight on that. You know the work that's going on with that, Commissioner. Yeah. We're bringing our outcomes down. There's nothing significant in our section 136. It's pretty much as usual. The only thing I would highlight on that slide is that obviously we had 3 incidents where we couldn't have, we had no ambulance available to us, but given the pressures on the NHS at the moment and so on, it's not really surprising, but we do take each one of those forward where we find them. I've asked for some slight changes to this going forward so that we can look at the overall picture and not just residents and non-residents, because I would like to see the overall picture for stop and search. But it is really worth just mentioning our use of powers board that is now set up and running, which scrutinises not only stop and search, but also use of force, taser, our use of body-worn video, and what we call coercive power, so arrest and detaining, etc. So that's the main thing to pick out of that one. There's not huge amounts of changes within that one. You're aware of the picture for both of these 2 slides in relation to our FTE and where we're currently at around our police officers. So our target being 1,645, and we're currently over that, which is great, and where we want to be. And then our diversity isn't where we want to be, unfortunately, because we're still only seeing 2.55% of our officers, for example, are from a minority ethnic background, or Black or Asian. So it's still some work for us to do there. I think we've already talked about that slide and the trajectory in relation to police officers. PCSOs remain steady at the moment, but we've got 10 just started, but a number have left as well. So our current sort of rate of PCSOs is what it is there. There's nothing significant to talk about. And then our sickness absence, again, it's within limits. I would like to see that start to drop off again now the winter is starting to fade away. We should start to see our figures drop down again, but I would like us not to be at this high level that we saw in March last year. I'd like by March start to see that drop back down to what I would see as spring levels. That's really it in a nutshell, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for that canter through. Next month's PAM meeting, I'll make sure that we spend some extra time on that performance update. So thank you very much. Now we'll go to agenda item 6. We do have one question come in, which I think is important that we go through it quickly, because I know we're running out of time slightly. So Simon, the question is there a forward North Yorkshire Police strategy for utilising the Rural Watch groups county-wide? I believe they are very involved in locating stolen quad bikes and identifying road traders and those looking to steal from the isolated farm buildings and yards. And that's from Joe, who is a community connector volunteer with the North Yorkshire Police. Lisa, would you like to answer this?
Yes, I thought I'd put my hand up, Commissioner, to save you guessing who's going to answer. So we will get back to you, Joe, with a more detailed answer, because every area is different. So this is closely connected to Neighbourhood Watch, our partnership hub, which is not Alex's job, bless him. Our partnership hub obviously work closely with Rural Task Force and all sorts of work, but they actually are the team that connect with Neighbourhood Watch, setting up watch schemes, because it's not just Rural Watch, there's lots of different watch schemes. There are some very successful Rural Watch groups that use WhatsApp, and they go out on an evening and they read across with their local police officers, and they run operations and do all sorts of stuff. So there's some great work going on out there with quad bikes, has been mentioned by Joe. But in respect of that specific Rural Watch, and are there more that we can set up, there will be policies and guidance and all sorts of documents about setting up a Rural Watch, how you get involved with it, etc. So there are strategies that are linked to Neighbourhood Watch, and then how you set a group up, and then our local groups that are set up. But we'll get back to Joe specifically about setting up Rural Watch in a particular area with a group, and how we make that happen. So yes, there is a Neighbourhood Watch strategy that links into all the different watch groups, but we need to respond specifically to Joe about their particular community.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Lisa. Alex, really super quick, if you can.
It will be just something that on that point, the Chief will soon be awarding a commendation to a member of the Rural Watch who found a outstanding murderer who was on the run from Cleveland. So it's not all about the impact in rural communities. They've actually got someone extremely dangerous off the streets that was hiding in North Yorkshire.
Wow, that's absolutely fantastic. Thanks, Alex. Okay, right. So I'll just return to the agenda now. So we're on the last agenda point, which is any other business, which there isn't any, and the date of the next meeting is the 23rd of March. So thank you to all those that have contributed to the meeting and the public for the questions and watching too. And I wish you all a very nice afternoon. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.